Well, good morning, everyone. I believe we're still waiting on a few people to join, but I make that 10 o'clock. So I
Good
think
morning.
we'll start. Good morning, Councillor Shears. We maybe just make sure that everyone has their microphones muted just at the start. That would be helpful. Thank you. So I'd say good morning and welcome to the special meeting of Tayside Contracts Joint Committee. Again, as I've just said, I'll remind everyone in the Joint Committee that the public part of the meeting is recorded and will be placed on Tayside Contracts website for public viewing. Members should keep microphones on mute throughout the meeting unless they are speaking, please. Now ask the clerk, Mr. Boddle, to take us through the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Convener. So firstly, I would like to take a roll call for the minute, and I was asked if members would confirm they're present when I call their names. Convener. Councillor Rowe.
Muted myself, present.
Yeah, thank you. Bailey Roberts. You'll mark Bailey Roberts was absent at this moment in time. Councillor Short. Councillor Short. Can mark absent at this moment in time. Councillor Scullin.
Morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Shears.
Morning, I'm here.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah.
Thank you. And received apologies from Councillor Durno, and I believe that Councillor Gavin Nicholl is kindly attending as her substitute. Is Councillor Nicholl present?
I'm present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cowdy.
Present.
Councillor Meakin.
Convener, I think Councillor Meakin has been replaced by myself and Councillor Duff, so I'm here. And I think that went through a couple of meetings ago, so that's
Right.
a legacy.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for confirming that, Councillor Duff. No, amend that accordingly. Councillor Shepherd.
Present.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Present.
Councillor Gregg.
Morning, present.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
Councillor Welch.
Present.
Thank you. I've received apology from Councillor Forbes and understand that Councillor Smith is attending as a substitute. Is Councillor Smith present?
I am. Good morning.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Shires.
Present.
Okay, thanks. That concludes the roll call. It then takes you on to
Mr. Waddle, sorry, just
Sorry.
before we go on, I had confirmation that Councillor Roberts and Councillor Short would be joining. I don't see Councillor Roberts' name on the invite list. Can someone maybe just confirm that she has been invited? And I expect Councillor Short, as I say, should be joining shortly.
I believe that all councillors had been invited, and I'll certainly check that, and I'll invite Councillor Roberts at this moment in time if she's available.
I'm here.
There we go.
Right, okay, thanks very much. Okay, the declaration of interest. Is there not any members of any declarations to the content of the agenda as it stands?
Just give people a minute. No, I don't see any, Mr. Waddle.
Okay, thank you very much. That then takes you on to the supplementary agenda, which had been issued in item 2A, position of managing director and notification of retirement and recruitment of successor. On this basis, I can confirm that the item 3 on that particular note has been adjusted slightly to read as follows. To note that the convener, vice convener and vice convener elect will make the appointment of the next managing director under delegated powers from the joint committee in consultation with the clerk, proper officer and chief executives of the constituent councils, and this will be minuted accordingly and reflected as such.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Waddle. My note says, if I choose, I may take the opportunity to personally thank Mr. McNara, which of course I'm going to do. He's made a fantastic contribution in the time that I've been on the board. I'm sure all members will agree, he's been approachable and very keen to engage with elected members. So I've personally found it a pleasure to work with him, and I look forward to being able to embarrass him at the next full joint committee, which I understand he will be attending. But I would just like the opportunity to wish him well on behalf of the entire joint committee, and I'll bring in others to contribute if they wish. Councillor Lane.
Yeah, I was just wondering about why there's such a change on the last statement from what was in the papers. On the appointment of the managing director.
I believe that was your colleague, Councillor Cuthbert, had asked us for clarification on that, which is why there's been a verbal change to that, just to tweak that understanding of the exact nature of the selection process. But Councillor Cuthbert, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just to say that I read the agenda point in the email, and when I read it, it struck a chord with me that section 12.1 of the Minute of Agreement says that the managing director and senior members of staff will be appointed by the committee. Now, we weren't involved in the appointment of the strategic leads in any way. And the way that this was written implied that it was the clerk and the proper officer who would do the appointment in conjunction with the, well, in conversation, if you like, with the convener, vice conveners and so on. And that's wrong. So I did ask for it to be amended. I'm pleased to see it has been amended. But I am a wee bit concerned that we're kind of being taken out of the loop. And if we'd gone with the previous agenda point, we wouldn't have been the ones doing the appointment. That would have been the proper officer and the clerk, which to me isn't right. So I just want to make that comment.
Councillor Cuthbert, I don't believe that's accurate. It's maybe not entirely clear in your interpretation, but my understanding is that the actual way in which the MD is selected hasn't changed at all. And more senior members can correct me if I'm wrong in that, but I believe it's the same as was selected for the last MD. But I'm sure that clarification is helpful. So again, Keith, very grateful for your contribution and everything you've done to the board. And I know that I would note in particular your enthusiasm for the charitable contributions to the board and your involvement in that. So again, very grateful for all your time and effort out of hours on that as well. As I say, I hope the rest of the board agrees with that. And as I say, if anyone else wants to come in, I can see Councillor Short would like to come in at this point.
Yeah, it was just very much to echo your comments, convener. It was actually a bit weird because you asked Mr. Waddle and I went, what, Mr. Waddle? Have I been sleeping? Did Keith really join us? But you have been there, Keith. It's been really good. It's also very scary. I'm getting to the age now where people who don't look much older than me keep retiring. And I think I'm going to be still working for the next 100 years. But having spent such a long career in local authority, I think you should enjoy every single minute of the time that you have left, because it's a hard gig working with our communities, and you've done a good job. You've been very responsive, and you've been the second MD that's given me an umbrella with Tayside contracts on it. No pressure, those doing the employment of the next one, but thank you, and it's very much appreciated. And I would much rather have one of you looking after the three of us than three who don't work together, because we've got such an overlap and we do so much well, and I hate to say this, better together.
Thank you, Councillor Short. And yeah, showing my age there by doing the older person thing of flashing back to a previous person in post, so apologies for that, Keith. But as I said, Mr. Waddle was on my mind there from that previous selection process. But Keith, I don't know if you want to come in at this point.
Yeah, only to say, convener, thanks very much for the very kind comments. I'm with Tayside Contracts for the next 4 months, and I'm very much focused on doing my job to 100% as I like to think I usually do. When I do leave, as a result of the restructuring and appointments that we've carried out, I'm leaving a very competent professional leadership team for the incoming managing director to join. So I think when I leave, I'll be leaving the organisation in a very strong position. Thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Welcome. Thank you, Keith. I can see that Councillor Duncan would like to speak as well. Craig, please.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just briefly, just to say to Keith, you know, it's been good working with you, and bon voyage when the time comes, and onwards and upwards, etc. But seriously, yeah, you've been very good in your role, and it's been good to work with you. So my best wishes.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I don't see any further comments at this time, but as I said before, I fully expect to be embarrassing you at our March meeting. So we'll move on at this point and move on to item 3, please, Mr. Waddle. Mr. Willie, please.
Yeah. Thanks very much, convener. With that item being agreed, item 3 then is external audit annual report of final accounts, your ASCII recommendations, a report by the Managing Director, and Stuart Ingles here also from auditors, I believe.
Thank you very much. I believe that Diane is introducing this report. So, Diane.
Thank you, Convener. This paper presents the annual accounts, the audited annual accounts, and Audit Scotland's annual audit report. The auditors have issued an unmodified opinion on the 23-24 accounts, and they have included 5 recommendations within their annual report. Convener, may I introduce Stephen O'Hagan, who's the External Audit Manager from Audit Scotland, and invite him to talk us through the report, please.
Thank you, Diane. Stephen, would you like to come in now?
Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, thanks for indulging me here in presenting our report. So the papers we have in front of you, this is a report on the working conclusions for the 23-24 audit. The cover letter on page 7 includes a proposed opinion, which, as Diane said, is an unmodified opinion, which is obviously the result you're looking for from this process. And it also includes management representations request. This is again part of the process where we seek representations from the proper officer around the financial statements. Just to reassure you that the requests we have there are standard representations. It's part of the process we use in all audits. There's nothing in particular I would look to draw your attention to in that. We've also included in here our annual audit report, and this sets out the findings from the audit of the financial statements, and it also includes the conclusions in our wider scope areas that we're required to consider as part of the public audit model. In presenting this report, I am seeking confirmation from those charged with governance yourselves of any instances of fraud, any subsequent events, or any material non-compliance that you're aware of before we proceed and certify on the accounts. So I'd ask that if you have any, that you raise that as through this discussion. Again, that's part of our standard process to seek those representations, but we just need to make you aware of that. So if I turn to the report, and I just take you through quickly on some key areas in there. So the key messages on our report are included in page 3, and it's set around the areas, as we said, the annual accounts, and then the areas from the wider scope model. In terms of section 1 on the annual accounts, as I said, the audit opinion is unmodified. It's taken us a bit longer to get there, and this is coming back to just some of the challenges in making sure that we do the work to the appropriate quality levels and get the appropriate assurances within there. Unfortunately, a combination of that and some absences prevented us in taking the work to the committee in November as we'd originally intended. As we go through, we noted that there were some non-compliance with the accounts regulation requirements in terms of presenting the accounts to us. So there's a formal process where the unaudited accounts are formally provided to the auditor, and these weren't actually provided in a formal sense, although they were available through the committee papers. But there were some issues around the signatories, etc., that are required in there, and it's just part of the formality. In addition, the requirements of the accounts regulations include a public inspection notice. And some of the timelines around that weren't complied with from the body's side. So we've highlighted these and we've linked these into one of our recommendations about improving the processes for close down and ensuring there's a proper checklist and timetable to capture these items. If I turn to Exhibit 3 in the document, which is in page, apologies, I'm trying to find the page number. It's in page 13 of our report, page 31 of your papers. This highlights the significant findings in the key audit matters we identified through the audit. So the first one was the elimination of internal charges. In presenting the accounts, there are a number of charges that go through within the accounts, primarily around the use of vehicles and charging between the service areas. For the purposes of presenting these in accounts, these should be eliminated. And we'd identified that they had not been, the journal to process them had been misposted, and actually they'd been posted the wrong way. So there was a £20 million error in the accounts that were presented to you back in June. This has been corrected in the version of accounts that's now before you. Also, there have been some adjustments to the prior year figures as well, because it was identified that this journal hadn't been processed. So they've been reflected as prior year errors in the accounts presented before you. The second point we highlighted was around the unaudited accounts and the quality of the working papers. We did identify a number of issues, and this is one of the factors, along with some of the challenges and the resources, that has contributed to some of the delays in getting the audit through. There were a number of areas where the accounts were not, the supporting papers did not agree to what was in the accounts or adequately support the information that was in there, and required a bit of reworking by officers through the process. So we included a recommendation in the accounts just about having more clarity on the key stages and steps, and ensure that they're completed, and also looking at the qualitative aspect internally overlaid on that to provide some assurance on the information that's coming over for audit. The third item identified was around the non-current asset disclosures. Again, this comes back to some of the stuff on the working papers and the checks. We identified in looking that there were misclassifications within the assets in the unaudited accounts. These have been adjusted in the accounts before you. The adjustments don't actually affect the bottom line overall, but they affect the analysis in some of the accounts notes, and they were significant insofar as they were above our performance materiality and required us to consider other audit procedures. And they've now been corrected in the accounts presented for signing. Point 4 in there on the significant trading operation. Again, just have to highlight this as part of the process, that the Tayside contracts are required to make a break-even position over the 3 years, as reported in the accounts. When taking account of the IAS 19, the pensions liabilities costs, this is a deficit, and it has been for the last number of years. We don't report it. In previous years, that would have been something that had been commented on in the audit opinion. There'd be a paragraph around that to draw attention to that, but that's something that in the last couple of years is no longer a requirement. However, we are required to mention it in the annual audit report. A couple of other points in there just around classification of debtors. Again, it was just an error, a significant error that was highlighted in there just in the classification. It's not impacted on the bottom line again, but again, the note as presented was originally the note as presented was originally incorrect in terms of its analysis. And there were also some changes on the exit package admissions, again, just the numbers and the values that were presented in the unaudited accounts. So these are some of the these are the more significant errors we identified through the process. However, they've all been corrected in the accounts to be presented for certification. If we move to the other sections of the report, just very briefly, I'll mention them. These are the ones that are driven by the public audit model and a requirement to comment in some of these areas. In terms of financial management, we're looking at the sort of, does the organisation have sound budgetary processes, the ability to understand financial environment, and our controls in there working effectively? And we were able to conclude that there were appropriate financial managements in place. In terms of controls, we did highlight the specific issue around the journal and the internal sales that led to the 20 million error, but actually the underlying control environment around the rest of the systems we considered to be adequate. In terms of the financial sustainability in section 3, this is looking at the kind of sort of longer term, and we note in here that there have been improvements in this. The medium-term financial plan is now in place. This was one of the points that have been raised in previous audits in terms of getting that into place. In terms of vision, leadership and governance, our overall conclusion was that appropriate governance arrangements are in place, and that the body does have a clear vision and strategy and priority, and these have been set out. We did note a recommendation in terms of the improvement around the disclosure of that on the website. I think a lot of these documents, a lot of the core documentation for the body are through. They're available through the reports to committee. But actually, in terms of clarity to the public It's about making them a bit more accessible so it doesn't involve a document search, and it's about saying up front, look, these are the core documents, these are the core information as relates to us and our strategic direction and how we tend to take things, our plans to take things forward. So in terms of use of resources, the final section, again, we've commented there. I think the performance framework that's in place is satisfactory, and it supports the preparation and reporting of service performance information. We have noted there's a bit of scope to improve some of the existing reporting by including some trend data in the annual accounts, and there's a recommendation in there and a response around some planned improvements that are in place by the body anyway. At the end of the report, there's an action plan, so it captures the recommendations we've made and the agreed actions. And as with previous years, we will follow these up through our 24-25 audit. We've also commented on the prior year action plans, and we're pleased to see that those items have been addressed and we've signed them off as complete. So we'll continue to monitor these through 24-25. Looking forward, we're in the process of doing once we've signed this off, we'll be straight into a resource plan and looking at the timetable for 24-25 audit. I appreciate that the timing this year is not what any of us would like to have been in terms of signing off in January rather than November as planned. We'll work with officers to make sure that we've got arrangements in place with a view to working again towards the November timetable, the November scheduled meeting. As we said back in our audit plan, we're in a process of recovery in terms of getting back to normal timeframes, but it'll be through the audit appointment before we'll be able to accelerate all audits back to where we were before the pandemic. But we'll work with officers to pull together that timetable. I'd just like to take the time to thank officers for their engagement with us. It's been a challenge through some of this, I think it'd be fair to say. I think it's there's been capacity challenges, I think, and learning curves, I think, for folk in this, and hopefully working through into next year. Some of that will be smoothed out as we work through, and I thank members for the forbearance as well in just working through and getting to where we are just now. I'll pause at that and happy to take any questions, comments, etc. on the report. My colleague Ross Reid is also here as well to help if there's any with any of the answers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wigan, for that comprehensive summary of the findings and recommendations of the audit. Do any members have any questions for Mr. O'Hagan on the audit? I'll just give it a minute for people to decide. Councillor Cuthbert, please.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I was concerned about all the items listed in 5.4 in the report. And specifically, I'm really concerned about the turnover being misstated by 20 million. And that caused me to look back over previous reports. So, for example, in the business plan report for Tayside contracts, that is actually, it states the turnover is 110 million. So I was wondering, did you look at the impact of this misstatement, if you like, on the 110 million and to see what impact it had on previous reports and whether any of those needed adjusting?
Please.
Sorry, convener, happy to pick that up. I think Diane will probably want to comment on some of the internal side. I think there's some differences between the internal financial monitoring and what's reported versus what the requirements are in terms of reporting in the annual accounts. So these internal sales, they are internal charges that exist and are reflected, I think, through your internal reporting through the year. But for the purposes of the annual accounts, they're required to remove them because you're charging between services, those costs need to be eliminated in presenting the overall cost of the organisation. So the 20 million, just to be clear, the 20 million turnover has no effect on the bottom line because it's 20 million expenditure and 20 million income, so they net off to zero. But obviously for internal purposes of reporting through the year, those won't be eliminated. They'll have been accounted for in the reporting that's going forward. I'll pause at that. See Keith is looking to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Hagan. Keith, please.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just to reaffirm what Mr. O'Hagan said, the figures don't affect the bottom line, the surplus deficit position. I appreciate there's some presentational issues, so where we've have the incorrect figures in historical documents, we can go in and change these, and we will do.
Thank you very much. So any further questions?
If I may come back on that.
Okay.
Yeah, just to say that when I was looking back over previous reports, I started finding all sorts of, how can I put it, anomalies with the turnover figures. The one that concerned me the most was the percentage share of business numbers. If you look at them back in November, they say that the council turnover totaled 89.306 million. Now, at that time, I thought the turnover was 110 million, so it wasn't looked at or challenged. But what the accounts are showing here is the turnover for 89.4 million. So there's hardly any other income coming from external sources, whereas throughout the reports, we refer to 5% of our turnover, £5 million worth of external work. So my question there is, I don't understand how the councils can give that level of turnover, which more or less matches the total turnover for the company, when we've got 5 million extra external income. So what's going on? And I think there's a whole lot of anomalies as I went through all the different sort of reports. There's all sorts of things being affected, that the 110 million has changed the perception from the one that's now in these accounts. And I'm actually quite concerned about it. And I think as a body, the committee needs to look at it and actually perhaps have a subgroup of this committee look at these figures to try and work out what's going on. But as I say, my main concern is the way that the share of business seems to total the total turnover of the group.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. I would say that I'm accepting the findings of Mr. O'Hagan and August Scotland in that this is a largely presentational thing, so I don't understand how that could affect the overall totals from the councils. But I'll bring in Mr. McNamara first, please.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I'll be honest, I'm maybe struggling to understand your argument, Councillor Cuthbert, and I wouldn't want to spend an excessive amount of time in this chamber discussing that. I think it'd be helpful to get your interpretations off table. What I would say is the figure of roughly about £4 or £5 million from external sources is a genuine figure. We can demonstrate the genuine nature of that. If you feel that whether it be the conveners group or a subcommittee, I know there's a general purposes subcommittee which could be used for this type of thing. If that's the will of the joint committee to get into the more detail around that one, I'm happy to broker that and carry that one forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. McNamara. I'll maybe just remind all elected members at this time that everyone has the right to contact officers of Tayside Contracts with any technical questions before or after meetings at any point in time if they're looking for clarification, especially if that's of a very technical nature or of a very specific ward nature for questions they might have. I think that's been reiterated at past committees, but I don't think it can be said enough. So if anyone's got any technical queries, they can always bring that up with officers at any time. Councillor McCall, I can see you're next.
Thank you, convener, and thank you, Stephen, for the report. I was looking really at the action plan and just the general statements, I think, earlier on that there was that you were satisfied that controls were in place, yet some of the actions are quite, for me anyway, quite glaringly significant. I mean, the fact that one of the recognised importance of ensuring accuracy and regulatory compliance in financial reporting, that particular aspect about working papers and an audit trail, to me, is a big issue, because if they're not correct, then what other things throughout the rest of the process is there? So while it's been adjusted for the accounts, I'm really concerned about the internal processes and procedures that are in place and whether or not they've been audited and recommendations made about improvements to them. That's the first part. Depends on your answer. We'll say whether there's another part. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McCall. Mr. Reagan?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor McCall, I probably should have been a bit clearer when I was speaking on that. So when I'm talking about the being satisfied about the internal control environment, what I'm talking there about is the main operation of systems, you know, kind of through the year, that I'm going to call it the day-to-day, you know, whether it be the processing for the ledger, for payroll, etc. So generally we're satisfied around the control environment for that. I draw the distinction then with what I'm saying about the kind of, let's call it the year end. So we've got the journal that we identified, the 20 million, as part of the year end process. And what we're talking about, the regulations, etc. That's all part of the kind of, let's call it the close down process, the accounts preparation and close down. And yes, we have raised the point about that because we do have some issues around that, and I think there's a lot of scope for improvement in that. But the general control environment in terms of the systems in operation through the year, we were satisfied with. So apologies if that slightly misrepresents or confused the position.
Okay, I have a slight supplementary then, if I may, and I'm not sure whether it's for you, Mr. O'Hagan, or whether it's for Tayside contracts, but I'll ask it anyway. So I'm very familiar with the closed down situation, and for that to run smoothly, it requires controls throughout the whole entire process, including the close down. So for me, reading these papers, it's very clear, my reading of this and the reporting that you've provided to us is that there's a gap there somewhere between the day-to-day operational matters, notwithstanding the £20 million that seems to have been, well, a discrepancy, or not, maybe not a discrepancy, but certainly overstated or understated or whatever, and corrected in the accounts. But the full audit trail should flow all the way through. And when you come to the year-end close down, then I don't see why that doesn't raise some alarm bells, because there must be something wrong in the processes going through where you're having information that's not complete. So I just want to understand if the processes that exist for the day-to-day, if there are also processes and procedures in place for the close down and where they followed and complied with.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Bring in Diane at this point, and I think we can probably answer that question. Diane?
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to give some assurances that the close down processes are all in place. So the figures within the annual accounts were correct. The issue with what we had was the review process of the backup working papers. So all the processes and controls were completed and correct in the ledger, accounts prepared on those numbers. What we did have a lack of is we need to build in more time within our in our reporting timescales to go back and actually review the working papers to check that they agree. So it's not, I can give complete assurances that the controls for the year-end process are all in place. The review of the working papers needs to be improved.
But sorry, maybe I'm missing something here, but the working papers presumably are the papers that are developed throughout the year as part of your day-to-day processes.
No, they're just the year-end working papers.
Okay, so
yeah.
But they're based on what you have throughout the year.
Well,
when you collate all the information for your year-end papers,
yeah.
So I don't understand why there would be a difference between one and the other. They should flow seamlessly.
Yeah, they when the annual accounts as we're going through and there's more and more entries going in at year end, there's a lot of changes happening. What we found is that the working papers weren't then, but if a change had been made at year end, as we've gone through the process in the ledger, the working paper we hadn't gone back and just checked that the working paper had been updated to reflect it.
And so are the working papers signed off before so the working papers follow the ledger adjustments, not the other way around?
Yeah.
And as an auditor, do you think that's the correct way around, Mr. O'Hagan?
I think just to be clear on that, some of the adjustments will be things that are in the ledger, and some of it is about the checklist of things that need to be done in producing the accounts. You know, they don't all flow through the ledger. You then take that information, you make certain, you make certain, let's call them manual adjustments. You know, some of the things in the ledger.
Yeah, I get that.
Process it, and you do the checks. And I think I would agree with Dan. I think most of the steps were covered, but the qualitative aspect in terms of ensuring that in completing the step, does the paper adequately support what's then been reflected, you know, what was taken from the ledger and what's been then reflected in the accounts and the analysis. That's where some of the errors came in, where some of the papers, if an adjustment had been made, to the information that's flowed through. The supporting paper hadn't been updated. So we were presented maybe with a supporting paper that relate to an earlier position. So it's a qualitative check on that to make sure that it's all been done at the right point in time.
Okay, so my experience has normally been that you would have some sign off to make adjustments to the accounts before you would. It feels like a retrospective step to make the adjustment first and then go back and rework the papers. So that gives me a little bit of concern. So I'd like to understand what processes are being put in place to make sure that we don't have that sort of discrepancy in the future.
Can I come in again, convener?
Please, Dan.
Yeah, so going forward, we are going to build in that qualitative check that Stephen's mentioned within our year-end timetable. We have had capacity issues as well within our team, and a lot of improvements have been made in terms of how we did present the accounts to the auditors this year, in terms of how we pulled together the trial balance, and we were been focusing on improvements in some areas, and we've let slip processes in other areas, but I can assure you that will be rectified going forward.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks, Councillor McCall, for the question and scrutiny. And thanks, Councillor Ling, for your patience. But I'm going to bring in Mr. Emmett, because I believe he'll want to comment on this item, and then I'll bring you in. Robert, please.
Thank you, convener. I can understand members' concern, and this does appear, from what I can see, that it hasn't been picked up by audit in the past, and now we've identified it's picked up. What I would like to suggest, that if Diane's comfortable, is that she can provide an update through the revenue monitoring in the course of the year about progress with making sure that the right process is being followed and we're ready for the year end, and that might go some way to allay Councillor McCall's concerns about this being a problem which is ongoing, and I think that'll be fairly easy to do, to report back on progress with the actions. Dan's nodding, so that would seem to be a way that we can provide some ongoing assurance to members.
Thank you, Mr. Emmett. That's really helpful that we can build that in, and see Diane's happy to do that going forward. So we look forward to that coming in the future. And again, Grant, thank you. I'll bring you in now.
Thanks, no. You handled it in the correct way. Quite happy with that. What this is, with reading the report and also today's conversation, it seems to bring us, we have some talent within members of the committee who seem to know their way around audit in some way. And you know that I've pushed before, and we had a majority, but not a majority that satisfies Tayside contracts, as the memorandum of understanding or whatever, to have a scrutiny and audit committee. I think that would work a lot better and be less time consuming than individuals phoning the managing director for specific points, because you bounce off each other if you're doing something in audit and looking at it, and one person will look at it a different way. So I think this is as good an argument as anything. What we're seeing today is that there should be, as we've to sign everything off, there should be members from the committee, should be as a critical friend, be an audit committee or a scrutiny committee, because I think that it's obvious that would be beneficial as a critical friend. I was wondering if Mr. Hagan, what his thoughts of having a committee, a small committee to do audit internally with elected members would benefit at the end of the year.
Thank you, Councillor Ling. With the greatest respect to Councillor McCall, who does have audit background, I would point out that the mistakes that have been picked up have been missed by previous internal and external audits over the years. So I don't see how having a subcommittee of lay members would have picked this up when external and internal audits happened. We have had this conversation before, and I'm sure we'll have it again in the future, but two external recommendations from Audit Scotland themselves last year and an independent report said that there were adequate governance arrangements in place. But I'll bring in Mr. Hagan just to confirm his view of the current situation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's for it is for the committee to decide themselves what is the most appropriate, whether that includes some form of audit scrutiny committee to separate that out. I think the activity is being performed. I suppose, Councillor Ling, I think your question is just about whether it's given, sufficient focus. I suppose, and by using another committee, that would allow you to do that, but it brings its own burdens. It's really, that's a decision for yourselves to make. It's not for audit. What I can say to the moment is that we are content with the arrangements that are in place, in terms of the scrutiny that is undertaken through the committee. If organisationally that's something you want to look at in terms of how it's delivered in a different way, that would be entirely your decision. It wouldn't be for audit to influence that one, I think, just now, because as I say, we're satisfied with the general arrangements.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Hagan. We've had quite a few questions on this item. Can I take this report as agreed now, please? Thank you. I'll take that as agreement and move on to item 4, please. Councillor Cuthbert, I can see you've got a hand up. I did say Councillor Lang was the last one in this item, so we'll be moving on now, please. Mr. Waddle.
Yeah, thank you very much. Community on to item 4, programme of meetings. And as indicated, the programme meetings was agreed at the last meeting of the Joint Committee on 18th November. As we know, these meetings are currently held remotely, and should it be the case that the Joint Committee was minded to go forward in hybrid format, the option was, as indicated in that particular note, that it would rotate on every June. The host authority in June this time around would be Angus Council, who would then be the convener for Tayside Contracts Joint Committee. I can also advise the Joint Committee at this morning's meeting of the Evaluation Board, Joint Board, that they agreed to go down the hybrid format as indicated in that particular note. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waddle. So that is the current position. I would have liked us to move forward at hybrid faster, but that's where we are. So we'll be moving to hybrid meetings as of June. Any further questions on this? Councillor McCall, please.
Yeah, convener, I didn't hear you saying that Councillor Ling would be the last question on this, so I've maybe missed it, but this is a really important paper, and I think we have time, and I think it belies the whole fact that there's adequate scrutiny if you're not allowing a member of this committee to be able to ask a question when we have the time to do so. That's my comment. I'm disappointed that you've taken that stance. Thank you.
Okay, that's noted, Councillor McCall. We're on item 4 now, and there being no other questions, I'll take that date as agreed. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, convener. So we're moving to hybrid in June as indicated in the note. The date of the next meeting of the Joint Committee would be 10th of March, and that particular meeting would be held remotely at this time and as indicated. So that would then take us on to the confidential part of the agenda, and you bear with me at this moment in time. I'm about to stop the recording and also check if there's any members of the public present so we can proceed to the confidential item.